here we are again with Dragon Ball Dissection, or more specifically, DBD TV, the spin-off series where I talk about the changes made to the animated adaptation. In other words, it's all about filler. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I must have appealed to a slightly broader audience last time, which is great. I'm always glad to entertain new people. Less great were all the angry boys in my comments, so let me reiterate this for anyone who might be new. Dragon Ball Dissection exclusively analyzes Dragon Ball in its original Japanese form. Any and all terminology I use is derived from that. We're not rocking the dragon, nothing is mondo cool, and the cat decidedly does not love food. No. I don't know what a Dabura is. Sounds like a ghost with self-esteem issues. Anyway, the Majin Boo Arc. Still so much to talk about. Too much to be contained by a mere numbered list. You know who one of my favorite late edition Dragon Ball characters is? Videl. For the few minutes she's utilized, she's awesome. Oftentimes I question why she's even in this series, given how she's immediately tossed into the reject pile and has almost no effect on the story. But, I already covered that. At least the animated series gives her a few more interesting scenarios after Toriyama kicked Great Saiyaman to the curb in favor of more endless fighting formula. There's a fun series of sequences immediately following Vegeta's death that focus on what the Left Behinds do in the aftermath of the tournament. The shockwave caused by Vegeta does nothing substantial to Boo, but actually succeeds in downing the group's plane. I find that incredibly funny, personally, that Vegeta has once again nearly killed the love of his life. Even when he's trying to redeem himself, he can't stop breaking everything. Thankfully, number 18 is on hand to perform the very last thing of interest she does in the entire series, and Yamcha's mechanical expertise is enough to get them flying again. However, their real target is the Dragon Balls. The manga implies that Bluma simply has them, but the animated series takes the time to show the group collecting, well, only one of them. But it is enough of a feature that the entire episode is named The Struggle of Videl and the Others, Find the Dragon Balls. How about that? You toil away voicing characters in Dragon Ball for over 8 years, only to find that you lost top billing to the one who's only been around for 40 episodes. Poor dolts. Anyway, this sequence is a lot of stupid fun, featuring a dinosaur eating a bird's nest with the Dragon Ball in it. Yamcha blasts the thing, only succeeding in driving it underwater. And there you go. That's the only combat scene Yamcha has in this entire arc until he dies. And I have to assume he purposely wasn't trying to maim the creature, but still, I've always thought this was a pathetic-looking key disc. This is a guy who trained with gods, and he barely seems more capable than the talking pig. Videl does at least earn her top billing by being the first character to dive in after it, just edging out Chi-Chi. You might wonder where number 18 is in all of this, but she insists that she and water don't get along. I assume she's referring to her artificial nature, and while I don't think such an idea is ever brought up again, I also don't think it's ever been contradicted. Still, it is rather odd given that she lives on, an island. Oh, but maybe it could make her useless standing around waiting for Cell to find her finally make sense. Of course she's afraid to leave the island she's on. She can't get wet. This is genius. Chi-Chi and Yamcha eventually dive in too, and the struggle isn't terribly interesting. What I always remember is Yamcha's initial excuses for not wanting to get wet, that he too is an artificial human. No, it's that his suit is expensive, but he can't take it off because his trunks are flashy. But once Videl and Chi-Chi have dived in, he cries out, "Flashy trunks be damned! If I don't go now, I'm not a man!" I don't know why, but that's always been one of my favorite lines to quote. Also, flashy trunks is what you need to call this character when he becomes a Super Saiyan. If we can have Super Vegeta, we can have a flashy Trunks. Those trunks aren't just flashy, but a bit loose-fitting, so if you ever wanted to see some cute Yamcha booty, I'm pretty sure this is your only chance in the franchise. Anyway, the sequence ends with a fart joke. I'd have to concede it's not amazing, but it's a lot of fun. I've always found it quite refreshing to see some of the ignored members of the cast get a fun adventure and cute character moments. This sequence actually leads to a later alteration. When Goku sends Trunks to retrieve the Dragon Radar, they add scenes of Trunks searching the Capsule Corporation compound to no avail. Then the characters remember that the radar is actually in the plane because they had been using it earlier. It's a small thing, but I'm impressed that they remembered it. No one knows how to get in touch with Trunks to tell him that until, in a moment that wonderfully dates this series, Videl reveals that she has one of those newfangled cellular telephones because she's rich and works with the police. I don't really buy the police thing. She already has a wrist-mounted communicator for that. But hey, Videl's presence saves the day. It's a moment as timeless as conveying plot-crucial information via fax machine. Another small but important change involving Videl you might not have even noticed is this. In the manga, Piccolo invokes Videl as a bargaining chip against Boo, pointing her out as Mr. Satan's daughter and claiming that she wants him to wait an hour before fighting Goten and Trunks. She never says this, or engages Boo in any way, really. It's probably true she would agree with that sentiment. However, at the end of the day, Piccolo is simply using her as a prop. Videl is nothing more than a plank of wood. The animated version tweaks it slightly to give her a little bit more agency in this. After Boo initially refuses to wait out the hourglass, Videl steps forward, demanding to know why he can't just wait. Boo is annoyed at the impertinence and would have killed her, except that Piccolo quickly thinks to reveal that she's Mr. Satan's daughter and uses that fact to convince him to listen to her. It's the same idea being conveyed, but the TV series conveys it much more powerfully. The idea doesn't just appear out of thin air. We see how Piccolo is inspired to use it in a moment of desperation. The threat against Videl's life ramps up the tension, forcing Piccolo to think on his feet, making his assertion serve two functions instead of just one. And most importantly, it's a tactic that is prompted by Videl's direct actions, not simply because she happens to exist. She expresses the desire. He has the knowledge of Boo's loyalties to make it stick. It's spontaneous teamwork that creates a better moment for both of them. Definitely a good change. To wrap up this look at Videl, when we reach the end of the series, Dragon Ball Z takes some inspiration from its then latest movie, Dragon Fist Explosion. If Goku won't do it, who will? Rather than Boo's reintroduction into society happening solely through narration, Episode 287 showcases his first adventures as a good boy, wandering the city and trying to figure everything out. He earns money to buy food by entering a street fighting competition. This sequence is directly lifted from Goku's first adventure in the city. After losing their money to Boo, the hapless buskers turn to more nefarious enterprises, namely robbing a jewelry store. Unfortunately for them, Boo is visiting it with Bluma. It's also unfortunate for the two superheroes who show up to stop the robbery, only to find the criminals ready to surrender. Yep, those superheroes are Great Saiyaman number 1 and Great Saiyaman number 2. Yes, Videl as Great Saiyaman number 2 carries over into the series. As I talked about when I covered that movie, I love the concept of Videl joining Gohan as a superhero. This is not nearly as impressive an outing for her as the movie was. Truly, it's little more than a cameo, one that seems to assume you've already watched that movie, which had come out half a year earlier. Still, I'm thrilled the animated continuity definitively places her in it, if only for a second. You know, I've made my peace with Gohan's lack of a helmet. Well, not really, but I'm gonna pretend I have. I've made my peace with Gohan's lack of a helmet, but why does he keep leaving his cape at home? Anyway, that's enough of that. Let me just quickly remind you that for the rest of the month, I'm still giving away this SH Figuarts Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku to a creative patron. Follow the link in the description to create a fun new name for this transformation, and he can be yours. The contest is open to all patrons through the end of the month, no matter your support level. It's a fun way to support the channel and get your hands on a pricey collector's item. Thanks so much, and I hope to see you soon in Dragon Ball GT. I'd go on about Videl, but I don't think there's anything more of her to discuss at this point. We've pretty much covered it all, and I have something bigger in mind anyway. Last time, I promised you I'd discuss what I consider to be one of the most important changes in this arc, and that if you watched DBD regularly, you'd probably already know what it is. Time to see if your guess was right. One of my many major complaints when I covered the manga was how little care was given to Boo killing off most of the cast. It's barely noticed. It happens off screen. It's all done in a group so they don't feel like people. More attention and importance is placed on the nameless extras Vegeta kills than to nearly all of the Dragon Ball cast being wiped out at once. It's a slap in the face to the series regulars, and it carries all the dramatic impact of a wet fart. I don't care if the animated version expanded this for no other reason than to kill time. They could have done almost anything to it, and it would have been an improvement. Firstly, it improves the moment by actually showing it, granting it the focus to make it matter, dwelling on the fear and inevitability of death enough for the audience to care. That alone is huge. Obviously, there's only so much this retelling can change. Everyone still more or less dies in a group. Not every character gets focus. We don't get any pathos for, say, Oolong facing the end of his life. It would have been impossible to do so, taken too long, and that's fine. The animated version gets the point across by choosing to center on Kuririn and letting him be the representative of what they're all presumably going through. Everyone is staring down Boo, who has just escaped from the Room of Spirit and Time, and Kuririn decides he has to keep his daughter safe. He might not have gotten around to naming her yet, but he still wants her to live. As such, he rushes Boo to hopefully give everyone around him time to escape. Thus, he becomes Boo's first victim. Well, of this murder spree. Unfortunately, it does next to nothing to slow Boo down, and we see his wife and child fall next. As Boo gets impatient at his fleeing victims, he fires his beams indiscriminately, catching everyone else one by one. The one thing I tried to give the manga version credit for was what could be considered an artistic choice, that of the discretionary edit. It cuts away, so instead of seeing the carnage firsthand, we experience it by seeing the horror in Goku's eyes. I appreciate that, in theory. At the end of the day, I don't think it's a good enough trade-off to dismiss the cast so easily, but because of that, I appreciate this next change all the more. In order to make it creepier and more visually distinct, when Boo transforms everyone else, we only see their shadows, cast by the light of the spell that's turning them into chocolate. I think that's chillingly effective on its own, but it also serves as a good compromise. Whether the anime or manga does something better is subjective. However, some of the changes or even additions can undermine, if not totally refute, an idea Toriyama is going for. I love the rewrite to Great Saiyaman, but I also admit expanding that section of the story expunges Toriyama's punchline of Gohan creating a superhero identity, only for it not to work at all. This changes the substance, but it maintains the creepy idea behind it of cutting away from the carnage, letting imagination do the work. I think it succeeds far better while still paying homage to the author. It accomplishes exactly what I've often praised this storyline for doing. It juxtaposes silliness and body horror in a way that makes it all the more horrifying. Boo really does come across like a supernatural slasher villain in this sequence. You can run anywhere, but there is no escape. He will find you and he will eat you. In your final moments, you will be helpless and humiliated. It even throws in a quick shot that subtly foreshadows that Dende might manage to get away. It's also just such a great moment for Kuririn, recalling his best hopeless but plucky everyman roles he's carried at various points in the series. It demonstrates so much maturity, even compared to the 20-something who feared death because it would keep him from getting married. Now he's shouldering the responsibilities and sacrifices of family life without hesitation. Remember that this is in the same episode where another filler scene has Bluma chewing her friends out for letting children fight their battles. Whatever you think of that scene, this is clearly a response to it. Kuririn is standing up for the remaining child in his life. The futility of the gesture makes it even more gut-wrenching. He accomplishes nothing. And that's not in the dismissive, power-scaling way of, "Oh, Kuririn could never stand up to Majin Boo, what a worthless character." No, that's what makes the scene work. That's drama! Some have brought up to me how Yamcha is once again shafted in this scenario. I guess that's not untrue. All he does is run away and look upset. Just like with his pathetic little key disc, Yamcha can't do anything until he's dead. And then he's suddenly Chuck Norris if Chuck Norris were Tuxedo Mask. Whatever. Sure, it might have been a good moment if Yamcha had stood alongside Kuririn. and the Muten Roshi, and Videl. But here's the thing. Making a sacrificial gesture to buy time to let the others get away only works if the others go away. They read the room, they knew what was going down. This is the time to retreat. Also, Kuririn has a specific through line. He is protecting someone specific. He is sacrificing for someone specific. Having anyone else there would just dilute that, turning it into a generalized last stand. And I'd rather have that strong character moment than have several weaker character moments solely to service the fans. I guess that's a good argument to be made for only Vegeta attacking Cell at the end. I love Yamcha as much as anybody, probably more than most, and long for the story to treat him right. But sometimes you gotta know when it's not the moment for your pet character. At any rate, it's their deaths that serve as the emotional payoff, which, again, is sort of the point. These moments are supposed to make you care, and they succeed. Unlike the changes to the Great Saiyaman portions of the story, I was familiar with the manga's version of this for at least a decade before I ever saw it animated. For what it's worth, this is certainly not a case of me preferring what I was introduced to. As I mentioned when I covered the final Z movie, this sequence also carries some unintentional emotional weight. It's Miyauchi Kohei's final performance as the Muten Roshi. He passed away while his character was likewise deceased. In some ways, that makes this the most impactful Dragon Ball character death because he never really does come back. At least, not the same as he was before. I'm so glad he was given lines in this episode, rather than being one of the several silent characters in this sequence. I must find balance. So here's a counterexample to wrap things up. A moment where the animated series takes something the manga did perfectly and utterly ruins it beyond recognition. You might remember that one of my favorite moments in this arc, one of my favorite moments in this series, in this franchise, is Mr. Satan bumbling his way into making Boo a good guy. It's a perfect non-combat solution to a problem, one that furthers character and highlights that wacky Toriyama humor, held up alongside some of the most horrific acts of violence the series has ever shown. It all being undone by some random gunman is the biggest turning point in the arc. It's some of Toriyama's best writing. It hits all the right beats, and it's paced exactly as it needs to be. Let me briefly remind you of the sequence of events in case you've forgotten. A dude and his manservant are taking advantage of Boo's wiping out of Earth as an excuse to kill random people. They happen upon Majin Boo's house and shoot his puppy. Boo is uncontrollably furious, but is calmed when he sees Mr. Satan stop them. That loyalty and defense of the innocent reinforces the lessons that Mr. Satan managed to teach him and brings him back down. Boo is able to heal the puppy, but as they're celebrating, the beaten gunman gets back up and shoots Mr. Satan in the back. At that point, the grief and anger are too strong, and Boo separates into good and evil halves. In the animated version, that last bit doesn't happen. At least, not right away. They do celebrate. Majin Boo rebuilds the house, now in a happy puppy shape. They all go inside and have fun, they take a bath, they cook dinner. Do you get why I'm getting frustrated here? There are two guys with guns 50 feet away from your house. They didn't just disappear. Did you forget about them? Hey, turns out the gunman didn't forget about you. That's why he sneaks into your window and shoots you, you idiot. What even is this? This is asinine. This is completely broken. This is murdering the pacing at a level of incompetence not seen since Tao Pai Pai climbed the karting tower in the middle of his fight with Goku, and everyone just decided to take an extended time out. There can be no emotional resonance when the characters are almost literally too stupid to live. These guys either lack object permanence or have had their brains swapped out with that of a goldfish. And it's not as if their stupidity distracting from the impact of the moment is the only problem this rewrite creates. As far as I see it, this is why Boo snaps. He experiences a moment of severe trauma, and before he can even really process it, he's hit with another one. It's that bam bam impact of placing them back to back, the second one right at the moment that he feels relief, that is too much for him to handle. Their animated counterparts have enough time passed that they seem to have forgotten the first trauma even happened. The status quo is so reset that even though I knew where the story was supposed to go, when the shot rings out, I seriously expected Boo to heal Satan and for them to go back to their dinner. This Majin Buu is not on the edge of a breakdown. He's just living his life like he was the first time. Every impact these gunmen had on them has already been reversed and nullified. They rebuilt their house. They rebuilt their lives. They can clearly do it again without any fuss. What's different now? Why should this matter? I don't buy it. And this is too important of a scene to completely lose its believability. It's the scene the entire rest of the arc is predicated on. I'm honestly trying to think if any adaptational change animated Dragon Ball has ever made has managed to so completely mangle the story. Even the Tao Pai Pai example I mentioned only messes up the pacing and intelligence of its characters within that sequence. At least the rest of the fight and the rest of the arc aren't affected. Here it ripples out to affect every subsequent action Boo takes, and I can't believe I've never heard anybody else talk about this. More people need to be talking about this. Please, go forth now and raise awareness. Looks like I have one more video in me on this. Yeah, we're going to part 5. Get ready to set a new DBD TV record. It's only fitting to set a final DBD TV record in the final installment of DBD TV. I hope you will join me for it. I hope you enjoyed this one and that you will share your opinions of my opinions down below. If you can support the channel monetarily, I always appreciate it. Those of you who do, make sure to get those contest entries in before the end of the month so you can give Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku his forever home. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.